Book 3, Chapter 101, continuing with verse 23. They entered this house and sat and walked about with happy faces. Inside, they chanced upon 3 pots as bright as gold. The first 2 broke into pieces upon their lifting, and the third was reduced to dust at its touch. The far-sighted princes, however, took up the dust and made a new pot with it. It means that though these sheaths are as volatile as air, yet it is possible to employ the vital principle to action. Then these gluttonous princes used the pot to cook a large quantity of rice for their food, amounting to 100 bushels minus 1, enough to live on for their whole lifetime. The princes then invited 3 Brahmins, childhood, youth, and age, to the food prepared for them, 2 of whom, childhood and youth, were bodiless, and third, old age, had no mouth with which to eat. The mouthless Brahmin took 100 bushels of rice and ate it up because he had devoured the child and the youth. The prince took the remainder of the Brahmin's food for their meal, which was nothing. The 3 princes, having refreshed themselves with the traces of the Brahmin's food, took their rest in the same house of their next home, then went out on their journey to hunt for new homes or repeated incarnation. Thus I have related to you, O Brahman, O Rama, the entire story of the boy and princes. Now consider its significance well in your mind, and you will become wise thereby. After the nurse finished telling her pretty parable, the boys seemed happy with what he had heard. I have told you this story, O Ram, in connection with my lecture on the subject of the mind. This story serves to explain how the mind fabricates this imaginary being of the world. This air-built castle of the world, which has come to be taken for a reality, is like the story of the body, only a false fabrication from the old nurse's imagination. It is the representation of the various thoughts and ideas of our minds that exhibit themselves to view according to our notions of them in our states of bondage and liberation. Nothing really exists except the creations of our imagination. It is our fancy that fashions all the objects in their peculiar, fantastic forms. The heavens, earth, sky, and air, and also the rivers, mountains, and the sides and quarters of the sky are all creations of our fancy, like the visions in our dreams that join and disjoin the fashion seams in their fantastic forms. Like the princes, the rivers and the future city were mere creations of the nurse's imagination. In the same way, the existence of the visible world is only the product of man's imaginative power. Imaginative power manifests all things all around, like moving waters show the rise and fall of waves in the sea. It gives a shape of very nothing. It has the power of apprehending ideas and combining them into new forms and combinations. The imaginative power of God raised the ideas of things in his omniscience and all-comprehensive soul. These ideals afterwards manifested as real by his omnipotence, just like things lying in the dark are brought into view by daylight. Know from here on, O Ram, that the whole universe is a network of imagination. And your imagination is the most active power of the mind. Therefore, repress the thickening phantoms of your fleeting fancy and obtain your tranquility by relying solely on the certainty of the immutable soul of soul. So what we've just read, of course, tells us why we're doing what we're doing at Sahasrara Shirsha Brahma meditation. We employ the imagination with every sutra, because this is the power behind sanyama. This is what causes manifestation. And the reason we're doing this, we know the universe is an illusion, but there are billions of people who don't know this, and they are suffering. So we want to create a situation to help them. This is why we do this program. As a side benefit, the practice of sanyama, when conducted in this way using the imagination, is extremely powerful at balancing karmic traces. So we will receive an incredible bonus for our work, which is Jivan Mukti. We will become liberated. Using the imagination, we have a question. Using the imagination during the sutra, can you give a concrete example of using the imagination during a sutra? Yes. Every time we think of sutra, for 1 to 3 seconds, while we're thinking the sutra, we're imagining in as vivid, three-dimensional, full color, full smell, all the senses. We employ in that 1 to 3 seconds while we're thinking the sutra, imagining what the outcome of that sutra is. For example, the sutra Aham Brahmasmi. When we think that sutra, we're not just thinking empty, flat words. We recall Aham Brahmasmi means I am Brahma. We recall I am Brahma means I'm the creator of this entire universe. We recall the experience during a vivid lucid dream in which we realize we're creating the dream right now in our mind. And how powerful that is. That we can change that dream. We can do whatever we want with our dream world. We recall the beauty of Goloka, which is the model of this world, with all its amazing, wonderful features, waterfall, forests, mountains, lakes, rivers, ocean. Everything that inspires awe when we see is part of this beauty of nature. And this is our creation. Now, I've just used several minutes to speak about all of this. Your challenge is recall everything that you've ever heard about and learned about in our readings of Yoga Vasishta, about Lord Brahma and the creation of the world, and the beauty of Goloka, which is the model. Take 1 to 3 seconds to touch on that marvelous and amazing imagination of what it must be like to be the creator of this universe. Then nothing. Then let go. Like dropping a pearl into a still lake. Your only action is to drop the pearl. As soon as you drop the pearl, you let go. There's nothing more for you to do. You come back to the self and back to being totally 100% established in the silent way, without expectation of anything that might come. That is the instruction for Sanyama on any sutra. And we have a number of sutras in our meditation. So each time you think one of those sutras, devote yourself for 1, 2, or 3 seconds maximum to touching on the most vivid imagination of what that sutra means that you can conjure up in your mind. You should do this while you're thinking the words of the sutra, not as a separate thing. You don't think, aham brahmasmi, and then, okay, what does that mean? What is the imagination with that? And then start conjuring up all sorts of imaginations. No, that's wrong. While thinking, aham brahmasmi, allow your mind to totally expand into the most vivid imagination of I am Brahma. I am the creator. This world is my creation. I created it in my mind. This is an incredible, vital, vibrant, real, appearing, lucid dream in all 3 dimensions, with employing all 5 senses. That is your task. Now, you may fail at it the first time you try it, or you may only imagine some just little fragment of something. But that is why we do it repeatedly. Because you're going to get better and better and better. At some point, if you're successful with, first of all, being established in the silent witness before you think that sutra, not letting go of the silent witness while you're thinking that sutra, and coming back to the silent witness, completely absorbed in that unbounded, infinite awareness of the silent witness, then you will be surprised. And it's always a surprise because you're not expecting anything. There in the screen of your mind, the Chittakash, you will see an incredible universe. And you will know this is my universe that I am creating now. Now, all of this takes many minutes to describe. It takes a few seconds to experience. And the more vivid the experience, the more quality and quantity will arise in those few seconds. Chapter 102, on the indivisibility and immortality of the soul. Vasishta continues. The ignorant are subject to errors caused by their false fantasies, from which the wise are entirely free. By imagining and attributing perishable properties to the imperishable soul, the ignorant beguile themselves like children who take dolls to be men. Ram replied, what is this imagined perishable property that is imputed to the imperishable soul? Tell me, O greatest of theologians, what misrepresentation misleads the mind to the false conception of the unreal world or a reality? Vasishta replied, the soul, by its continued association with unreal and perishable things, thinks itself to be one of them, and takes the title of an unreal and perishable ego. Just like a boy, by association of his thoughts, imagine a false apparition to be a real ghost. All things being situated in one absolute reality, it is hard to account for one's personal ego and to say how and from where this conception became established. In fact, there is no ego except that of the Supreme Soul. Yet, is the nature of the unwise to make a difference between a finite ego and an infinite ego, and between a mortal and an immortal soul. As if we see two streams of water in the sunbeams of a hot sandy desert. The mind is a spacious mind of richest gems in this extensive creation, and depends on the Supreme Soul for its support. Just like waves depend upon the waters of the sea for their rise and existence. Therefore, O Ram, give up your false view of the reality of the world and your reliance upon the baseless fabric of the universe. Rely with delight upon your judicious review of the true foundation and support of all. Inquire now into the nature of truth, with a rational understanding. Being freed from all error and bias, discard all that is false and untrue. Why do you think that the unconfined soul is confined in the body? It is vain to suppose the infinite soul is confined in any place. To suppose one to be many, is to make a division and create a variety in the nature of the Supreme Spirit. Again, the divine essence, being diffused alike in all, it cannot be said to be confined in one thing and absent in another. The body being hurt, the soul is supposed to be hurt likewise. But no pain or hurt or sickness of any kind can affect the unchanging soul. The body being hurt or weakened or destroyed, there is no injury done to the soul. Just like a blacksmith's bellows being burned, the wind with which it was filled escapes unconsumed. Whether the body lasts or falls is of no matter to us. Like a flower being destroyed deposits its fragrance in the air. Let any pain or pleasure befall on the body, like dewdrops falling on lotus leaves. It cannot affect us any more than a fading lotus affects or afflicts a flying bee in any manner. Let the body rise or fall or fly in smoke and mix with the air. These changing forms have no effect whatsoever on the soul. The connection of the body with the soul is like that between the cloud and the wind, and between the lotus and the bee. If the mind that forms a part of all living bodies is not affected by physical pain, then how is it possible that the primary consciousness, power of consciousness, that resides in the soul can be subject to death? If you know, O wise Ram, that the soul is indestructible and inseparable, then what is the need to have sorrow for the supposed separation or disappearance of the all-pervading spirit? After the body is destroyed, the soul flies from it to live in the empty, infinite space of empty air, like wind mixing with air after dispersing cloud, and a bee flying away after the lotus has faded away. The mind is not relaxed with all its enjoyments of life unless it has burnt down by the knowledge of truth. Then why speak of the annihilation of the soul? The connection between perishable body and imperishable soul is analogous to that of a vessel and the fruit it holds, and of a pot and the air in it. As a plum is held in the hand, or it falls into a pit, so the empty soul is reposed in or deposed from the body. As a pot being broken, its empty part mixes with the air. So the body being dissolved, the soul remains unhurt in empty space. The minds and bodies of living beings are apt to disappear at times from where they live and hide under the shroud of death. Why should we sorrow for such renegades? Seeing the death and disappearance of others, no fool learns to think for himself, but fears to die like all ignorant fools. Therefore, renounce, O Ram, your selfish desires, and know the felicity of ego. Give up the bond of the body and fly upward. Like a new-fledged bird, leaves its nest and flies above. It is an act of the mind to lead us to good or evil. It is another function of the mind to fabricate the false fabric of the world, like appearances in a dream. Our incorrigible ignorance stretches out these imageries only for our misery. Our imperfect knowledge shows these falsehoods as realities to us. The mind gives us a dim sight of things as we view the sky hidden by a mist. It is the nature of the mind to have a false view of objects. The dull and unreal world appears as a reality to us. The imaginary duration of the universe is like a protracted dream in our sleep. The thought or idea of the world is the cause of its physical existence. Just as the blinking of the eye shows 1,000 disks of the sun and moon in the clear sky. Now, Ram, employ your reason to annihilate the physical world from your mind. Just as the sun dissolves snow by the heat of its beams. As one wishing to overcome cold gets his object at sunrise, so he who wishes to demolish his mind concedes at the rise of his reason. So this is a very interesting statement. It seems that what Vasishtha is saying is that we should use our mind, our intellect, and all the reasons that we have been given in Yoga Vasishtha to doubt the reality of the world and literally disassemble the dream of the universe. Annihilate the physical world from your mind by employing your reason. How should that work and why will it work? Now, the reason, the ability of the mind to determine differences between things, discrimination, it's called, is a very important quality, an ability. But I thought we had only one ability, that is to think a thought. But what is thinking a thought? It is the discrimination of unbounded, infinite, pure consciousness and some particular aspect of unbounded, infinite, pure consciousness. That particular aspect being the thought. So when we think a thought, we are literally using our intellect to discriminate between everything that is the thought, that thing which is the thought. Maybe the thought is a mantra. We think the mantra, we are picking out of the infinite possibilities of unbounded, pure, unmanifest consciousness, one particular possibility. And that is the sound of the mantra. This is our most simple task and the simplest thing that we can do to employ our intellect. We isolate from the infinite possibilities of consciousness one particular sound. And so we have discriminated, haven't we? Here is infinite, unbounded, pure awareness. And here is our mantra. And those are the only two things, literally, the only two things that should be occupying the mind. Now, in practice, probably that's not the only two things occupying. We think the mantra, a thought comes about something we should have done before we started meditation. Or a thought comes about someone who treated us badly 18 years ago. Or a thought comes about, wow, what are we going to do with all the money we win in the lottery? Who knows? There are many thoughts that can arise in the mind. And they seem to find this time of meditation to be a wonderful time to come up. Nothing we can do about it. We are employing our intellect to discriminate between the sound of the mantra and unbounded, pure, infinite consciousness. That is our task. That is called Dharana. That is called thinking a mantra. By doing that, we are reducing the huge, incredible, unfathomable complexity of the entire universe into two things. A mantra, which is just a sound, a meaningless sound, and infinite, unbounded, pure awareness, which is the silent witness. So we're discriminating between those two things to the exclusion of everything else by simply not having that as our intention. And the result of that is the most pure and basic experience of moksha possible. On one hand, we have the silent witness, which we are, we identify with it. We are the silent witness. We are not even thinking the mantra. And on the other hand, we have the mind, the body, the personality of who we have identified with is thinking a sound. This is what a scientist would do if he wanted to isolate the particular properties of something. He would remove all extraneous properties until he had isolated all the particular properties of the object of study. He does this for two reasons. One, by getting rid of all the other things that are in the way, that are on the plate. They don't distract him from all the minute and subtle properties of the object of investigation. And two, he sets up the most important part of the scientific method, and that is the experiment must be repeatable by another person. If you come up with something and you say, this is science, I have used science to discover the property of something, and then you say, but I was very sloppy and I'm not really sure how I did it, and I didn't write down all the steps, and so you just have to believe me because I can show you how to repeat it. That's not science, is it? We get the feeling that science has degenerated to that level in modern society. When we study and think about what is called the COVID pandemic. My goodness. People are all saying, trust the science. So we say, okay, very good. Let me trust the science. Please, what is the science? And the person who said, trust the science, just stares back at you with kind of a blank stare. Well, I don't know what the science is. I'm just repeating something I heard someone say. And we all know science is infallible. We must trust it. But when we do look into the origin and nature of the COVID pandemic, we don't find anything in there. We don't find a mysterious, wicked virus. No one has even isolated this virus. We find stories of how people have the flu. And someone called it COVID. And someone else said, oh, it was much different from the regular flu. I know because a friend of mine had it and he said it was terrible. And that's really all we know about this so-called COVID pandemic. So there's no science behind it at all, is there? In fact, the scientific method is rarely used at all in modern society. But we are using it. in our practice of meditation, because we have a very simple, isolated experiment to think a sound while observing it from the silent witness. And we have all the instructions for replicating this. Anyone can replicate this scientific experiment in their own mind. Now, you may find it's cluttered with other things that go on in the mind, but we understand where those clutters come from. The balancing of the karmic traces that occurs when we employ our intellect in this way. So we are literally using the mind to disassemble and ultimately annihilate the creation of the mind. This is exactly what Vashishta is saying here. As one wishing to overcome cold gets his object at sunrise, so he who wishes to demolish his mind succeeds at the rise of his reason. Now, we have said many times, the experience of moksha is no mind. The mind is totally demolished. I am the self. And how does one succeed at doing this? By employing the power of discrimination to know the difference between two objects of observation. This is the basis of the scientific method. And by refining the discrimination to the utmost level, in which there is only two things and then only unity, arises moksha. As ignorance increases, so it introduces a train of deep-seated errors and evils. It spreads a magic spell around it, just as Sambara, the sorcerer, showered a flux of gold dust about him. The mind, by its worldliness, makes the way to its own destruction, and the acts the part of its own self-destructive catastrophe by all its acts. The mind wants only to preserve itself from destruction, but it is a fool who does not know its imminent death.